Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, your host, Sam Webster Harris. Today, we're having an absolute masterclass on growth mindset, business, and importantly, uncovering our fixed mindset. Now, no one thinks they are stupid. No one thinks they are making a mistake during the process of making a mistake because your mind inherently only thinks that it does stuff that is correct and good. Now, this means that we just don't recognize our areas of fixed mindset thinking. So often the biggest things holding us back are outside of our awareness. And perhaps the things we need help with are the things that we don't need any advice or assistance on. Well, on the show today, I have coaching expert Matt Lerner, who is an ex-VP at PayPal and now runs his own business consultancy, helping businesses grow and uncover their fixed and limiting beliefs. Matt is a truly great thinker and teacher, and our discussion today will honestly help anyone learn to be more humble, whilst at the same time achieve a much higher amount of their true potential. We launch into the episode discussing the intersection between psychology, computers, and human history, and Matt's philosophies on the shifts in society and how modern technology is shaping the world around us and our minds and mindsets. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, you've had a bit of a varied career. What first got you into building at growth and marketing teams? Just sort of where were you coming from? Like, what did you study? What was going through your brain?
For whatever reason, I was always drawn to ideas around kind of the intersection of computers and human psychology. As an undergrad, I had an interdisciplinary studies major, so I got to take courses in psychology, cognitive psych, computer science, and communication, other courses all around the university. And then in graduate school, I studied rhetorical theory and criticism. And what that really meant for me specifically was I was looking back at major epochs in human history and how new communication technology coming online led to these huge transformations in society. And even as far back, I'm sure this is quite esoteric, but as far back as the ancient Greeks, with the advent of literacy, when they first started writing things down, that coincided with this sort of shift from relativistic Eastern thought to the absolutist Platonic ideas of right and wrong and truth and falsehood that have guided Western philosophy for the last over 2,000 years. Later on, the advent of the printing press in Europe was very much believed by historians to be a partial cause of the Protestant Reformation. More recently, Marshall McLuhan, the advent of the telephone and the television and trains and cars have all coincided with and caused these profound shifts in society. And, as I was studying this, I was realizing, well, this is actually happening right now. This is happening right now in Silicon Valley, and this was 1996. And, I can go be a part of this. And there's this really exciting stuff going on. I have really valuable skills. And when I jumped in, given my background in kind of psychology and human communication, for me, marketing and growth were sort of the obvious places to jump in. Because I never really studied marketing formally, I think me and a lot of people doing this at the time just decided to work things through from first principles and sort of figure out, okay, who is this customer and what is this product? How far are they getting in the journey and how do we find them and everything? So in the beginning, we didn't have all these tools. So literally I would get an engineer who would work with me and I would give them instructions and they would build software to track who was clicking on our ads and whether they signed up or not. And then when I would send the ads off to the advertisers, I'd say, hey, can you put this little code snippet up with the ad so we can track it? And they'd say, sure. It was that much kind of building stuff from scratch. So anyways, that's how I first got into it.
Oh, yeah, it's really interesting. I love the background. I've been quite fascinated on that. I've been reading through some of my ancient philosophy as well over last year. And it's kind of funny to think that people didn't have books and all these things. And I think most of the great stories were just like memorized in people's heads and stuff for like quite many generations before we even had like writing and things. And yeah, it's just like concepts that are really hard to actually like even grasp when you're just so far away from that now. But yes, interesting. So what do you think? I guess you must have had a bit of a growth mindset to jump into something that you hadn't done before. What do you think were the attitudes and mindsets that really helped you succeed then?
I guess maybe the first one was just coming in and not thinking I had the answers. And in fairness, that's because I didn't, right? I don't think any of us did. First of all, I hadn't studied any of this in my background. And second of all, we were all doing stuff that no one had done before. So first, just coming in with that humility of, I don't know and nobody else knows, and we're just going to have to figure this out. I think that was the first piece of it. And then once it got going, I think for whatever reason, once I got to a point where I felt like I was really mastering something and something was really working, I would then sort of jump out of the comfort zone and move into a totally new role or a totally new job or a totally new career and just sort of push myself to go back to being bad at stuff again. Because I knew that it would be uncomfortable. I didn't always like this, but I knew that this discomfort would cause me to continue to grow in a way that I wasn't necessarily if I was kind of at the top of my game and comfortable in a role.
I'm not sure if it's a good quality almost, as in like, as soon as I feel like I know what I'm doing, I'm usually get bored quite quickly, and I like really being in the deep end where I'm quite far out of my depth. But then that means that you don't spend too much time doing the things that you're a master of and really producing as much. So how would you strike that balance between doing things that you're kind of bad at and learning lots versus executing in a way that you're like, the master of the thing? And was there any kind of formula that you had for that? Like, okay, do something, okay, at least produce the goods for like 3 months before moving on to the next thing? Or was it just very random and opportunistic and less formulaic? Or...
Yeah, I'm not going to lie and tell you that this was ever a plan or a formula in the outset. I think it started really simply as I get bored. Like, I'm doing this, it's going well, and I'm getting bored. And I need a new challenge, and so I start looking for one. But back to your point about kind of once you're good at something, maybe you should keep doing that thing, because that's obviously the highest value. So I'd say that most of the time when I would seek out a new challenge, it would still be moving in the same direction. So for example, it would be taking on a role of increasing leadership and promoting somebody to take over my old role, or horizontally moving out to add a new skill to my leadership or to my arsenal or whatever. And really the sort of fundamental sea change to a totally new area, even those had a lot of compounding to them, but I really only did them fundamentally when I thought they were going to get me closer to a goal. So for example, for 11 years at PayPal, I would take, for example, when I moved to the UK, I decided, okay, I'm building and running teams in the US, it's going well. I have no international experience. And here's the chance to go from running a marketing team to being a general manager of a business. So for me, those were both a huge step that very much compounded and took advantage of stuff I already knew, but gave me new challenges. And then at some point I decided I was very deep vertically into growth marketing in a big Silicon Valley company in the payments industry. And so then moving into VC was, for me, was like the T part of the T-shaped ultimate level, because you see as an investor, you see hundreds and hundreds of companies. So I could sort of round out the depth I had and sort of learn to pattern match and which of these things does or doesn't make sense across mobile apps, B2C, B2B, SaaS, all that different stuff. So I think each of these, at once is sort of compounding and moving me in a direction. And then, of course, leaving the world of venture and starting my own company is just a million challenges getting thrown at you. So I was always trying to build on and leverage what I already knew, but just add more skills that I thought would help me move more in the direction I was going.
I guess there's lots of tangents I'd love to go into on that, but on the starting your own company, having had firstly really deep experience building one, then very broad experience sort of applying that across many different startups before then running your own, how do you create a culture of that in a startup? Or do you think it's just natural as an entrepreneur, you probably need to have a growth mindset firstly, so you're going to have that before you start it? Or do you think you can start the idea and then like develop the growth mindset afterwards? And if so, how?
Startup life and growth mindset are inextricably linked. If you're in an established business model, there's people who have done it before. There's plenty to copy. If you work at Unilever, you can hire someone from Procter & Gamble and they're going to know how to sell detergent. If you work at HSBC, you can hire someone at Barclays and they're going to know how to market credit cards. But if you're trying to build the first ever app for social listening to podcasts, or you're trying to invent Slack or Notion or whatever, you're trying to create something new in the white space where there previously was nothing, there's no playbook. You literally, the only thing you can do is go figure it out yourself. So, at its essence, the core, the one thing that makes starting a startup different is literally going to be down to your ability to have that pace of learning and growth. And that growth mindset as an individual and also at an organizational level. The organization that can try stuff and learn the fastest is going to win. And if you look back at any of these great startup success stories, whether it's PayPal or Slack or Uber or Airbnb, they went through years. Uber, not so much. They got lucky pretty quickly. But for the rest of those examples, they went through years of trying stuff that wasn't working and pivoting around and learning stuff and figuring out how they were going to make this thing and how they were going to get customers. It's a journey of indeterminate length. They call it finding product market fit, right? Airbnb was trying stuff for years before they figured out how to hack their way onto Craigslist. So literally the pace of learning is the rate limiter, is the thing that governs your ability to succeed as a startup. So I guess that the first part of your question, right, was like, does this matter? I think the answer is yes. And then you were asking, as an organization, as a leader, how do you cause that?
How do you create the culture of growth and learning as fast as possible and making people kind of not stay within the limitations and having a growth mindset as a personal leader and as an organization?
This sounds sort of vague and cliche, but I mean this to be a very specific thing. It starts with you having a growth mindset, because I'm sure you've seen in your years as a leader, you'll hire people like you and they will model your behavior. And so the first thing is you can't come in thinking you know all the answers or expecting people to know all the answers. And so I encourage leaders to model the right behavior, which is to talk openly about what they don't know, what they're not good at, what they're trying to get better at, and talk openly about mistakes they've made. I think that's the first one, because then they create space where everybody else can do the same thing. I just sent an email out to my list, actually, I don't know if you read the one earlier this week.
I did. I was like, I'm going to do this. Listen, we do a weekly roundup where we talk about like our wins and bad things for the week, which does help a bit. But yes, your email was great.
It was this story for people who didn't get the email. We were at PayPal, and this was, I think 2010 or something. There was a big corporation at that point, and the products were not very good, and we weren't listening to our customers. And we got a new president of PayPal, a guy named David Marcus, who is a very successful entrepreneur in his own right. And one of his first all hands, he got up on stage and he said, "Let me tell you about a mistake I made." And he talked in honest and sincere and humble terms about making the wrong choice on a parts supplier for a device, a card reader that we were making, and the millions of dollars and weeks of delays and unhappy customers that cost. And I think his whole point was tacitly to say, it's okay, we know our products suck, and it's okay for all of us to talk about that. It's essential for all of us to be able to talk about that and own it, because that's the first step to making it better. So the first piece is to model the behavior by yourself, for yourself, to your team. And then the second piece comes when people do make mistakes or don't know the answers. That needs to be okay, and that needs to be acceptable. If you're one of those hard-driving bosses who expects everyone to come in and know everything and do everything perfectly, then people are going to try really hard not to make mistakes. And if they do make mistakes, they're going to cover them up and hide them. And that's really going to undercut your ability to learn as an organization. I think for a lot of people, especially high achievers, this is very counterintuitive way of living, because you think about it, you go to secondary school, right? And you've got to do well in your GCSEs and well in your A levels, which means making no mistakes. So you can get into a good uni, so you can get good grades, which comes from making no mistakes. So you can get a good job with whatever the coolest jobs are, with investment banks and consulting firms. So you can go in and be a good trader or good consultant and make no mistakes. Then you come into a startup and suddenly you don't have all the answers, and there's no playbook, and there's no like crack the exam study guides, and you've got to go and try stuff that you're going to screw up, which is scary and no fun. And then you got to make mistakes and reflect on them and think and talk openly about them. And so it's actually a really huge behavior shift for people. And so calling that out, first of all, just saying like, this is different. It's okay to not have all the answers, but what's not okay is to be complacent with that. What we need to be doing is trying stuff and making predictions. And then I guess the last piece is this idea, what I just said about making predictions, because I think we all have a hindsight bias. We all see something and think we thought that all along. So when I work with teams, I like to have them run experiments, literally experiments, like a test and a control, like an A/B test, and have everybody in the company write down, publicly make a prediction, including the top leaders in the company, about what they think is going to happen. Because then a week later, inevitably, you're going to find out that most of you are wrong. And that's going to force everybody to sort of re-examine their mental models about who your customers are, how your business works, what people care about, the stuff that you really need to be learning. So those are a few. So to summarize, come in with a growth mindset yourself, model the behavior, deal with it well when people don't know the answers or make mistakes, as long as people are kind of learning from the lesson. And then be public about getting people to make predictions about what's going to happen and then revisiting those predictions so that you can really explicitly learn from them. Been doing this with a lot of companies for a while now. So
yeah,
I hope it's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. I'm looking forward to doing that. So on the making predictions side of things, that throughout any kind of project, task, team, whatever, because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do that with like my founders. We've got like a meeting today after lunch. Let's make some predictions about what we're trying to do. But in all like avenues, can you do that? Or yeah, I guess like when you're coding, it makes sense. Like sprint, how many do you think we're actually going to do with our tasks, that kind of stuff? Just wondering.
I mean, when I do it with companies, or not. Usually the big space where the learning needs to happen is between what you your inside out view of what you think you're building and what you think you're selling and what your customers are actually trying to do. What are your customers' goals? What are they trying to achieve? What are they worried about? Where are they looking for solutions? There's a big gray unknown area in between there. And so I think making predictions about stuff that lives in that space. So I mean, to take your business in particular, it says you can listen to podcasts and audiobooks with friends. So implicit in that, there's an assumption that, people either they're with their friends and they're trying to think of things to do, and maybe podcasts and audiobooks is the thing. Or maybe as you're listening to podcasts and audiobooks, you wish that could be a social experience. There's an implicit assumption in there about something people want to do. And to have a successful startup, you really need to get super clear on what's in people's heads. Where are they? What is it they're really trying to do? Why would they want to listen with friends? To discuss this stuff because they're bored, because it's more interesting, because they're stuck in their house during lockdown. Where does this fit into people's lives? So as much as you can shed light on that space between what you think you're building and what your customers are actually trying to do and how you can help them. And so that's why I think it's important to make predictions in those areas. And then really specifically to do it around experiments. So it's not just we predict we can do this many features in the latest development sprint. But, we believe our customers want X. Therefore, to test this, we're going to do A, B, C. And if we're right, then we expect this number to move in this direction. And if we're right, we will do X, Y, Z, or however many thing in the business after that.
That's helpful for framing how we're going to do things. Cool. So back on to sort of growth mindset and things. Something that's I found very obvious is that there are areas where I'm very focused on my growth, and I find it really easy to be like, okay, I'm bad at this. I know I can be better, or like I'm good at this, but I know what to do to like improve. And there are other areas where you're just quite unaware, like even that you have limitations, and you can be very fixed and not even realize it. So how do we identify where we're holding ourselves back with a fixed mindset? And maybe in some cases, should we lean into that and be like, okay, maybe this is a weakness and I'm just really strong in other areas and it's more useful for me to be strong. And in other places, it's like, okay, this is really holding me back, but I didn't even know it. Listen, how do we come to terms with the places where we are weak and then work out what's the best action to take? Sorry, it's like a double question.
It's the great question. And I wish I had a great answer for you. I mean, I'll give you my thoughts, but I'd actually love to hear what are your highlights if you've asked this question to previous guests, because this is one I personally struggle with. I mean, throughout my career, I was sort of always trying to come to grips with my blind spots. I guess the first thing is just to surround yourself with blunt, honest people, depending on what culture you come from. If you come from like, what do they call them, a high context to a low context cultures, there's just people who are more blunt and direct. Found that in Silicon Valley, for example, and listen to them. People who know you well, people whose judgment you trust, people who are good at things you're bad at. I try to look back at myself in areas where I've sort of had patterns of underachievement. For example, there are certain roles where I've never been very good at hiring for those particular roles. And so like that's a clear thing. Or other people are trying to do what I'm doing and having more success. Sort of look at those. Another thing is I look at what work I procrastinate. Which work do I want to jump into and which work am I avoiding? And then what is it about the work I'm avoiding at an emotional level that I'm trying to put off? And then I guess the other thing was just what I said about occasionally just jumping out of my comfort zone. It's really hard, Sam. I don't know. Have you had any really good answers on it?
I've had a mix. It's hard to work out what the best answer is because some people go, okay, actually, if you're in a startup, you need to move as fast as possible. You're going to have some key strengths, really focus on your key strengths and try and hire the other people that like complement your weaknesses. That I think is very powerful because you get to do your best work. But equally, I've had loads of growth from sort of doing the opposite of that because like 4 years ago, I was very shy and not good at talking. Like I was very unclear with my words and also unstructured. And I'm still wouldn't say I'm amazing, but in the past 4 years running the podcast, I've got so much better at speaking. I've gone from being like barely able to do my introductions and stuff to just recording things off the top of my head and like releasing them as podcasts. And one of them became like a TEDx speech that I got onto. And then I did like stand-up comedy. And so I've come on like leaps and bounds there. And then that's helped so much more as a leader because I can rock up and, you know, give a good speech, explain what's going on. I can talk to investors without like sort of wanting to jump into a hole of my own making. I don't think I'd really been able to have done that without it, even though, okay, I'm still never going to be the same as my business partner who has just always been a salesperson that talks endlessly and he does more of the VC calls. But to be a CEO, I still think I needed to like embrace those things. And yeah, I've had people that do say more around like, okay, just look at all of your areas, reflect. And I think it's sort of just a mix of wood from the trees, like you said, I guess, is in having your reflection periods where you can like meditate or journaling. I found has probably been the most useful for me, as in just to sort of look back each day and try and like look back on the week and sort of think, okay, where was I failing? Being open to yourself, being open to others about it, and then getting the responses from like your mentors and having useful people around you with different qualities that can help you on all of it. I guess like the endless confusion that I have as a CEO is that you're just always stressed about making the best decisions and you're just trying to make the best decisions you can as quickly as possible. You just don't know if you're wasting your time investing in those things and you can't really ever A/B test yourself because I've just always wanted like a twin just to sort of see like that I could like whatever it was in life ever since I was like a kid, been like, okay, is it better to go running or is it better to eat chocolate or whatever? Or at any point in time, I just love to have a second version of me, just trying like the opposite of what I'm doing to see what happens. But I'll never know. So I just kind of keep on going. And it seems like a mix of focusing down on like the things that you really enjoy growth on, because if you just put more time into it and you do grow more on the things that you just naturally grow in, but trying to get some wood from the trees and reflect with other people and see what the things are you can't not avoid. I guess it's like just a threshold level, perhaps, is where I'm going with that. But that's more of like my own kind of feelings rather than a specific one guest said that. As in, if there's a weakness that you can't not address it, then the strengths where you just naturally spend yourself, like it's just super enjoyable for you to get better at it, then like honing on those and not worry too much in the middle. If it's appropriate for the time, like invest more. If not, don't worry. I think everyone should learn some speaking, like doing like a Toastmasters or something.
You covered a lot of really good stuff there. First of all, what you were saying about being a CEO, it is, you're the decider. I mean, whenever I work with companies, there's one thing I can count on CEOs to do is to make a decision, whether it's right or wrong. The point is, if you don't make a call, you're not going to move forward. And they're usually the one person in the company with the courage, to be the decider and say, well, this doesn't work. It's on me. And I think that's also a part of growth mindset then, is getting other people to be comfortable making decisions in the organization. Because often the people kind of closer to the subject matter may be able to make a better decision, but they don't want to, because if they're wrong, they'll get in trouble. But like ultimately the decision's got to get made, and so you'll make it. But back to your point, which I think is a really good one about focusing on your strengths versus your weaknesses and where to invest your time. I think it's a really good shout about, hiring people. I do always, whether it's through hiring or marriage or whatever, I try to surround myself with people who compliment me, people who enjoy doing and are good at doing stuff that I'm not great at or don't enjoy doing, or blind spots. But I think that can get you very far. And I mean, I've sort of gotten to a point where I don't spend a ton of time trying to shore up my weaknesses, because I know like I'm never going to be a great finance manager. No one's ever going to hire me to be a finance manager. They're going to hire me to help them grow, and I'm going to get a lot more. It's just like Serena Williams is going to get a lot more mileage focusing on tennis than trying to learn, right? At this point in her career, not to compare myself in any way with Serena Williams, But then, yeah, how do you know when you've got something that is actually a blocker that you need to focus on? I liked your idea of, think, well, if I enjoy doing this, then I probably want to try to get better at it. First of all, I'd say 80% of my time focused on building my strengths. Identify my key blockers. If I can't get that over to someone else who's going to be able to do it well or enjoy doing it, or if it really is still holding me back, then yeah, I'd say about probably one thing a year I would pick to really challenge myself at a weakness and try to dig in on that.
I like that as a formula. I think it's a good project to have. I did speak about doing journaling and reflecting, and I try to sort of have a bit of a bigger one over the Christmas holidays and think about, what you're working on for the year, and people set their resolutions. But if you set 10 resolutions, then none of them really happen. But yeah, if you just stick with one, then I guess that's better.
Is that what you did with the public speaking? Did you literally, were you journaling and thinking what's holding me back? And then you sort of came to, well, this year, I think if I'm going to be a CEO, I need to be a better communicator?
I think it happened. I set myself targets each year basically for the podcast. So the first time it was literally just do a podcast, and that was interviewing people. And I found that I had real issues with just trying to record the intros and outros and things. And so that year I kind of set myself targets send more voice notes in WhatsApp and these kind of things just to get used to it. Because I could never even record voicemails as a kid or as a 20-year-old. Even when I was running my first business, I hated it. So that was the first year. And then I was what can I do to develop this further the second year? And that was I'm going to record some of my own podcasts by myself the second year. And then by the third year, I'm going to take this really one step further and I want to really invest in being a proper speaker. So I applied to lots of TEDx's to get one. And then because I got one, I was how can I really smash this? So I did a stand-up comedy course and went into Toastmasters and doing as much as possible. And I think that was partly for myself because I knew less just to be a CEO, more just to be a human. I've just always felt I've had a lot of thoughts that are worth people hearing, and just general frustration at being an introvert that just sits and listens to other people and no one's ever heard my thoughts. The quietest people have the loudest minds. And it's just something felt wrong. That I've just always wanted to not have that. I've just been very jealous is the word of people who can do that, if you know what I mean. Or aspire to be that kind of person. So I guess I just always wanted to be able to have a voice. And that certainly leans into being a CEO rather than it being I want to be a CEO and so therefore I need to be able to talk. It was more, I just have thoughts, so I want to be able to talk. And then also because I have lots of thoughts, that's why I want to be a CEO, because I want to make my ideas happen. So they kind of blend into each other. But it has kind of been themed each year of set myself a target on that.
Good for you.
Thanks. What would you say are the books that you recommend most to people in regards to improving their mindsets or launching a business or improving their life?
Yeah, book recommendations really depend on who's coming to me and what they're asking. I'm just looking over at my bookshelf here. One I get a lot for early stage entrepreneurs is Rob Fitzpatrick's The Mom Test. It's a very good way to, if you're just starting out, to validate whether the world needs the thing you're making and whether you've got good language to describe it. In terms of personal growth, one that maybe your previous guests haven't recommended is a book by Marcus Buckingham called The One Thing You Need to Know. It's interesting. His premise is, and it's kind of a cheesy title, I admit, but his fundamental premise is once you really get to the heart of a topic and become an expert in it, there is often just one thing. And then he goes through 4 examples in the book. The one thing you need to know to have a healthy relationship, like a romantic partner in your life or a marriage. The one thing you need to know to be a great leader. The one thing you need to know to be a great manager of people. And the one thing you need to know to succeed as an individual contributor or, in your own execution. All 4 really profound transformational insights for me in my life.
Kind of want to hear what each of those one things are, but I guess
I think a book's over here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll read the book. Perfect.
Or audio book. You can friends.
True. Is there anything I haven't asked that I should have asked you about?
I mean, you can, we can talk a little bit about my business and what we do. If
sure.
Helpful to any of them. But...
Yeah, definitely. Because you, certainly help with people growing stuff. I don't know, we're into about mindsets, but actually how do you grow your business? So that would make sense if you want to talk about some of the lessons that you've learned and how you apply them to startups.
What my business does is most startup founders don't have a background in marketing or often sales or customer acquisition of any kind. A lot of times they're builders, they make stuff, they come, maybe from a finance or consulting background, something like that. And so we work with seed and Series A startups and help them, because I think then they just, they do want to hire someone who can come in and do that. And often that's a great thing if you can do it, but hiring someone is expensive, and it can take a long time, and it's a risky bet. Sometimes you'll make bad hires. And even if you do hire someone and they're good, they're gonna then want a budget and equity and things. So founders learn how to grow their own businesses and how to sort of build the muscle and upskill their team to align the entire company around growth. And then, like we were talking about before, to how to run experiments and learn from them quickly at pace. And so I guess that's where this sort of ties into the growth mindset that we're talking about. One piece of it is the growth process, which is literally, are you figuring out your key unknowns and areas of uncertainty and coming up with experiments to turn them into knowns and pin them down? And then the mindset piece is, do you have a bunch of people who are humble and curious and willing to try stuff and take risks and learn? So the whole program is really around crafting those two pieces of it, the growth process and the growth mindset.
Can you sort of tell a story like a problem that a company was having that you would then fix and why it worked?
I mean, ideally, the companies would fix it themselves. We'll coach and we'll advise, but ultimately we want to get companies to a point where they're doing this themselves. But like I was saying earlier, usually the big uncertainty for a company where you need to focus your experimentation is in that gray area between what you built and what you think your customers want and the progress your customers are actually trying to make in their lives. So one simple, like super clear example of that is a company called Popsa. I don't know if you've heard of them. They make photo books. And they're one of the more successful startups. I think they were listed as one of the fastest growing startups in the UK in 2020. They're doing really well. When we started working with them in, I think, 2018, people were searching for photo books. And, when you search for something in the App Store, you just get like the name, the icon, and a little short description. And there said fast, easy photo books. But when we started talking to their customers, everyone knew what a photo book was, but nobody believed fast and easy. Everyone wants fast and easy, but if you've ever made a photo book, it takes hours or days and you've got to install some weird kludgy software and it's a pain to use. It's just a giant pain. And people don't like making photo books. They want to have them. And when somebody says fast, easy photo books, nobody believes them. They had this idea. They tested instead of just changing that to photo books in 5 minutes. And just changing those words from fast, easy photo books to photo books in 5 minutes, which is concrete and specific and kind of nails that doubt about, is this really fast and easy? What does that mean? And that increased their install rate by 4x overnight. So literally quadrupled the growth of the business with one experiment. And that was by identifying and removing this uncertainty around what do our customers think when they see our marketing. So that's an example. And we do this a lot with different companies, but a lot of times it really just comes down to not really understanding what your customers are trying to do or are worried about when they're kind of bumping into your stuff. And so that you can, in a small number of words, you can say exactly the right thing to really unlock progress in the mind of the customer.
Thanks. Stories, I think, are really good ways to remember and learn things. That really paints the picture of exactly what you're talking about. So thanks for that.
Sure.
Cool. Do you have any questions for me?
It's been a really good discussion. Overall, you've kind of answered my main one, which is how do you identify your blind spots when you sort of think about your own growth? What have you learned from running a podcast that you did not expect?
Good question.
So what's been an outcome of running a podcast that you did not expect?
Well, one outcome was it was a bit more successful than I thought it might be, but at the same way, not too surprised. I also kind of was hoping it could be much bigger in some ways. And well, it's pretty big. I'm pretty happy about that, but it's not like I've overtaken Tim Ferriss or anything yet.
Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, damn it. But I guess I have been surprised by how easy it has been to get hold of people, which maybe isn't quite the same now as when I started, because so many more people run podcasts and people much more question like, how big is your reach in those things? Whereas when I first started, I'd be like, oh, a podcast, I'll go on that. But people are still kind of interested in, like, I know people starting podcasts now that are still able to get hold of like really big authors and things just because of when they go into the point of just releasing a book, you can get hold of pretty famous people just because they'll go into anything and everything just to like get their name out there. So you can meet some really cool people. And so that's, I think, been quite a big surprise. I kind of had that intuition. I did some journalism at uni. I worked for like a music writing thing. And I got to go to like free gigs and meet like artists just to sort of write a short blog on them. But that I was able to just start that myself and meet like really cool people and get hold of them in their time has been a bit of a surprise. I guess it was not like a huge life lesson exactly though. So I feel like I should give a better answer.
Well, I think there's a very big lesson in there, which is there's no harm in reaching out to people, whether you're fundraising or trying to get customers or run a podcast. It doesn't cost anything to get a no, and you'd be surprised if they say yes.
Yeah. And it's sort of can be a bit more of a numbers game, and you should just give up when like one person says no, because I've had plenty of people say no to me, and then if you keep going, you have like way better people say yes suddenly. You're like, oh, whoa, yeah, you shouldn't give up at all on these things. And it's the same with trying to raise money and other stuff. You get a lot of no's, but when you get used to that, you can go really far. Whereas if you just give up straight away because if someone doesn't say yes to you, then you're not going to get very far. So that's been super helpful, and you don't take it personally, especially when you do start to have a few wins. You're like, okay, cool. So someone doesn't care about me. That's fine. If other people do, doesn't matter. Whereas when you get rejected initially, it can be very like, oh God, I'm not worthy enough. No one cares about my podcast or my business or whatever. And you take it to heart, and you really don't need to. It doesn't matter at all. Like people might be busy or whatever. It has nothing to do with you as such. It's just what's going on with their minds and stuff.
I think that's a very profound lesson.
Thanks. Good. Often I learn lots from my guests, whereas I give an answer and I think it's a crap answer, then they tell me how good it is, and that's handy. So thanks for that. Okay. And thanks so much for an interview. Lots of really useful lessons. I've made lots of notes and going to be implementing some pretty much immediately. So thank you.
You too, Sam. Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks a lot for Matt coming on the show to discuss growth mindset. Learning to identify our fixed mindset is so valuable and also so much harder than we expect. So it was great to really dig into some of these topics as well as many other things that were discussed. If you want to find out more about Matt, you can search Startup Core Strengths or find him on LinkedIn under Matt Lerner. I can very highly recommend signing up to his email newsletter for anyone interested in business, running a business, or just developing a greater understanding of growth. On the personal side, I really did enjoy reflecting on some of the lessons that I've had from podcasting over the years. And I think it's a very valuable experience for anyone that does something regularly to really look into what it is that they've been learning from it and to think a bit more strategically about what they want to learn going forward and how they want to grow. I certainly want to be working on the scientific and psychology aspects of the show and really digging into the science of how we can be our best selves, as well as finding higher profile figures to get onto the show and growing out the YouTube presence and building more valuable short content on specific topics. So if you have any questions on the subject of psychology, self-improvement, please drop them in the comments on YouTube, Spotify, hit us up on any of our social accounts on the Growth Mindset Podcast, or send us an email at growthmindsetpodcast@gmail.com. Any questions you want us answered at all, please throw them my way. And as I look to build the show and grow more, of course, a positive review on whatever app you happen to use would go a long way. And you probably heard that a million times, and you will probably hear it a million more. Now, I hope you enjoyed the show and the episode. And more so, I really hope you enjoy your life. And to enjoy your life, that starts with enjoying today, because life happens in the moment as you live it. And there's no point putting off enjoyment for the future because it might never happen. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.